What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Also know that this is the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. And also realize that I am a certified empowerment coach and president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And I always love when we have friends coming back to have epic conversations with us. And this young lady has been traveling all around the place. The last time we spoke was at least 6 months ago. And at that time, she told me she was off to Europe. And I'm sure she's been to Europe and many other destinations in between. Who is she? It's Marilyn Barefoot. She is classically trained in tier one companies like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, General Mills, Nike, and Microsoft. She combines a wickedly smart and analytical brain with an intuitive gut and a sense of humor. That has to be added in her profile. She's a summa cum laude graduate from major advertising agencies like Vickers Benson, Bozell Palmer Bonner, Cossette Communications, and BBDO. She is obsessive about originality, a 3-time nominee for the Rotman Canadian Woman Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. She is also a much sought after speaker. She needs to win. Now forget this 3-time. Like, she needs to win. A hands-on leader, her high-energy brainstorming sessions, trademark big storming, lead to powerful results. She is also one who she inspires teams to look at every client project as an opportunity to be original. We are blessed and highly favored to have Marilyn Barefoot back again. Hey, how are you this evening?
I'm great, Dr. Vibe. Thank you very much for having me back. It's great to be back with you.
Well, it's long overdue, but I'm glad we've been able to get a half an hour of your time for you to slow down.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
On top of the wonderful background I just gave out you, can you just share one or two other things about yourself, like where you're born, a little bit more of your background for our audience?
Of course. Born and raised in Toronto, which is really probably a strange thing now. Born in the west end of the city, and went to school there my entire life, and was a language student in university, wanted to be an art student, but my parents decided that they didn't want to support a starving artist. That's the way it was viewed then, at least by them. Like, no, 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 you have to make something of yourself because we're not supporting as starving artists. So I didn't end up doing the fine arts career that I wanted to do, but I found a way back to creativity through the business I'm running now.
And how did you get into the world of advertising?
I will date myself with this answer, but here I go anyway. When I was a younger kid, there was a show on television called 30 Something, and there were all these very attractive, sexy boys who worked in an advertising agency, and they looked like they had so much fun, and it was very creative, and they went out with their clients, and they sat on patios and had margaritas, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I got to find a way to do that. So I was working in the Berlitz School of Languages and Sales because I had graduated from the University of Toronto with several language degrees. So logically, I ended up in a language career, and I wasn't really loving it. And I got to meet a woman who was working in marketing and advertising, and I just boldly went up to her one day and said, "Hey, are you hiring? Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing language sales. I want to get into marketing and advertising." So I started to work for her and then built up my repertoire, took extra courses at U of T, and eventually somebody took a chance on me in an advertising agency, and I got to do that kind of work.
Well, congratulations. Fantastic. What were some of the great lessons you learned from your career in advertising?
What we are probably about to talk about, which is the power of presentations, if you will, the power of conversations, the power of engaging a room. And I learned that. I can tell a story if you want me to.
Absolutely. That's what we're chatting about tonight, the power of storytelling. So let's just right into it.
Okay, so the biggest lesson was at the biggest pitch that I was ever involved in, and the biggest pitch I was ever involved in was $123 million, and it was when I was working at BBDO Advertising in Toronto, and we were pitching Rogers Communications. So we had been shortlisted. 3 agencies had gone and done the roadshow thing, and we'd been shortlisted. There were 2 other agencies on the shortlist, and there was an executive committee, which included Ted Rogers, God rest his soul. He was alive then, still, when this was going on, that was going to arrive at our boardroom to do this big, huge presentation for all the money. And we had rehearsed for weeks. Our president had brought in every pitch coach, every creative director, every consultant. We spent large on this thing because there was a huge bag of money available at the other end of the presentation. So I had been at BBDO 1 week, and I got a call from the president saying, "Get up here." So I went up to his office thinking, oh, he's welcoming me to the agency, but in fact he wasn't. He was saying, "We are pitching Rogers Communications. It's worth $123 million. We have 90 minutes. You get 20. I'm like, okay. What do you want me to talk about? He said, I would really like you to talk about the Rogers brand. Now go get busy. So I quickly realized that my next week was going to be pretty much sleepless, figuring out what to do, what to say, going to rehearsals, all those wonderful things. Well, the day came. I guess I'm talking about storytelling by telling your story.
Absolutely.
The day came, and we were at 3:00 on a Friday afternoon, and the big Rogers executive bus rolled up to Yonge and Bloor, which our fancy office was located at. And there was about 20 people that paraded off the bus. We had a red carpet. We had fresh flowers. We had people to greet them. We had welcome signs in the elevator. We took them up to the 32nd floor. We had a sushi chef preparing stuff. We had music. We had everything. We had thought about everything. We even knew that Ted Rogers was deaf in his left ear and where he had to sit within the room to be able to totally appreciate the presentation. So one thing we knew was that when Ted stood up, that meant your 90 minutes was over. And if anybody talked for even 1 word or 2 words over that 90 minutes, you were cut. 90 minutes was 90 minutes. Ted stood up. That meant wherever you were in the presentation, if you hadn't finished, you just shut up. So everybody was doing their presentation. It was lovely. And it came time for me to stand up. So I stood up, and we had rehearsed this, and it was terrific. And I launched, and I started to talk about, we're going to talk about the Rogers brand. And Ted Rogers stands up. And I panic because I'm like looking at my watch going, okay, we're only about 30 minutes into this 90-minute presentation. There's no reason why this man should be standing up. So I said nothing because I didn't know how to react to that. He leaned on the desk and he looked at me directly in the eye and he said, "What the hell do you know about the Rogers brand?" Of course, my president at this point was red in the face, starting to sweat, starting to speed dial HR. Like, of all the guys who's going to ask a question, it's got to be Ted, and he's got to ask the chick who's been at the agency for 1 week.
Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
I looked at Ted and I said, "Ted, we collectively as a team working on your business, we know nothing about the Rogers brand." And by this point, the president was starting to loosen his tie and feel like he was going to barf, and it was getting tense. So what I did was I told him a story about working at McDonald's, on McDonald's for George Cohan. And I won't get into all of that at this point, but the point was I was not allowed to touch the McDonald's Restaurant of Canada business as an account executive until I had actually worked in the restaurant for weeks. So the net of the story was I looked at Ted and I said, "We want to ride on your trucks. We want to work in your call centers. We want to go door to door. We want to work in your retail stores. We want to work in your marketing department. And until we've done all of those things, we don't know anything about your brand until we've lived it. So we need to live it." And he actually stood up again and clapped.
Nice.
So thankfully I saved my job.
Yes. Yes.
The funniest part of the story, and then I'll shut up so we can actually talk.
No, we are already.
The next speaker, after I got through all of this and everybody was happy with my answer, was in the middle of that presentation. So we had a number of us that were taking part in the presentation. And all of a sudden the whole room turned and looked out these beautiful big glass windows that went all around the boardroom on the 32nd floor. And there was a blimp that was flying by that had a tail banner on it that said, "Are you bored yet?" And it had been hired by one of the competing agencies that knew exactly when we were pitching and where we were pitching. And there was 123 million bucks on the line. So they decided to show us up by flying a blimp by our boardroom windows. We lost that pitch.
Oh.
But what I learned through the process of preparing for that multi-million-dollar pitch is much of which now I bring to the table for people that I do work with in presentation skills and storytelling.
Excellent. Before we move any further, I'm going to ask you to move your camera up just a little bit because, okay, that's perfect because we were missing at times the top of your head. That's perfect. That's perfect. So, you know what? Before we move further, can you share with our audience what you do now? Because you did have a history in the world of advertising. Can you break it down on what you do with clients these days?
Absolutely. There's sort of three main buckets. Bucket number one is brainstorming work. So two sides of the coin on brainstorming. I go in and facilitate professional brainstorming sessions for people like Burger King and Coca-Cola that are doing a number of really interesting things like, what's our new breakfast sandwich going to be called? What's our new product going to be called? What's it going to look like? How is it going to behave? I work with their teams to brainstorm those big ideas. I also go in at agencies and clients and I teach them how to do what I do. So that's bucket number one, which is brainstorming. And bucket number two is really what we are going to chat about today, which is presentation skills and storytelling. How to have a compelling conversation with somebody in a room that doesn't look like standing up like a cardboard figure and reading bullet points off a PowerPoint slide. And then bucket number three is, you can probably see it in the background there. There's a big Lego figure head with Walt Disney ears on it, or Mickey Mouse ears. I do Lego serious play. So that is using Lego bricks with teams to help them to literally build solutions to complex problems.
Excellent. In the world of business, has storytelling always been important, or has it become more important now?
It's a great question. In the world of humanity, storytelling has always been a pivotal thing. From the cave people who told stories with drawings on walls to our indigenous people who told stories through word of mouth and drawings and painting. It is the way we learn. It is the way we communicate. In business, no, it hasn't been something at all that's been a tool, although it's become a bit of a buzzword in the last couple of years, storytelling. It was considered negative. It was considered a negative trait, or it was looked down upon if you were to bring any of your essentially personal self into a business meeting or presentation. So that largely is still considered the way things are and should be in the business world, that you stand up with, whether it's a Prezi or InDesign or PowerPoint presentation, and you present that. But you don't inject anything of yourself into the presentation, and that is wrong. So what I am teaching corporate teams and C-suite executives is, in the world of technology that is so wonderful on one hand, but yet so dehumanizing, if you will, on the other. I mean, obviously not what we're doing right at this very instant, but email, and we have really lost a lot of the ability to be human beings to human beings and face to face and having conversations. So what I try to explain to people is that conversations are more powerful than presentations. It's not about standing up in a dark room and looking at a bunch of little raccoon eyes looking back at you. It's about full up lights, walking with people and having conversations about a subject that's important to everybody in the room, as opposed to standing behind a podium and reading off a teleprompter.
Makes a lot of sense. What do you think has caused this turn into the direction of storytelling in business? Do you see any social cultural things that have made this a turn now?
I think we, as people in this electronic and high tech world, we want to know that the person on the other side is a person. And I mean, we know because there they are, the human being sitting in front of us, but there's a desire to understand what makes that person tick. Now, I'm not going to suggest that somebody stands up and talks about their family for the sake of standing up and talking about their family or a recent thing that happened to them over the weekend. What I explain to people is that when you inject a personal story into a presentation, there is a reason, there is a business reason why you are injecting that personal story. But the world really is quite interested in stories, and the way that we process life when someone tells us a story goes back to the cavemen or when we were little people and we had books read to us. That's how we process better. So if you're looking at a screen with a bunch of numbers and graphs on it, you aren't processing it the same way as you would if somebody was putting it in the form of a story.
When you initially bring this thought process to the corporations you deal with, what is their initial reaction? Do they get it, or do you have to spend some time educating them and getting them on board to this thought process?
Usually the initial reaction is, we can't do that because that's considered unprofessional. And I have to explain to them that the story is within a business context. So example of one that happened recently in a group of people. There's a business point you're trying to make. In the Ted Rogers story, it was, you don't know a brand until you've lived a brand. That was the message. In this particular example, it was a group of people saying the message they're trying to send is, you get what you pay for. Something that's simple that we hear a lot out there in the big world. This man stood up and shared a personal story. So, inject. Let me tell you a little story to prove the business point they're trying to make. My wife and I had our first baby. The baby actually came early, and we weren't expecting the child to arrive for another couple of weeks, but the child arrived. And so I had to leave my wife at the hospital, and I had to go and get diapers so that we were totally ready with the nursery. I still had paint all over me, and the nursery wasn't ready, but we definitely needed diapers before we could bring the baby home. So I went to a store and I got, I'm not telling it as well as he did, but a bazillion diapers for $100. And I had them in the nursery and stacked them all up and everything was all ready. And I got my wife, we brought the beautiful baby home, and everything was going terrifically until the beautiful baby had its first poo.
Yep.
And the poo was everywhere, all over the beautiful, pretty blankets and sheets and baby, and the diaper was blown wide open. And we continued to try and use my bargain basement diapers, and they continued to be a disaster. And I have been a Pampers customer for the rest of my life because I found out the hard way that you get what you pay for.
True.
Now, it was a way in which he could do a couple of things. He offers a piece of himself to his audience by saying, this happened to me. Very self-deprecating, because here's me, first-time dad, don't know what the hell I'm doing, going to the store, thinking I'm saving all this money and getting a million diapers for $100. And then it almost becomes a bit of a stand-up comedy routine where you can imagine your head like turns into a bit of a movie camera where you start to almost see the kid with the blowout and the parents trying to deal with this and wipes and everything. I think that at the end of the day, we need to be able to connect emotionally with each other. And they say that storytelling and emotion is the fast lane to the brain. After he told that story, I think that group of people, may not remember the facts and figures up on the board, but they would always, yeah, you're the guy who bought 100 diapers and the kid had a blowout and it was a complete mess. I'll never forget you telling that story, because we process it visually in our head and we bring our own experience to the story. Like, Oh man, yeah, I remember the first time that happened if you were a new parent, blah, blah, blah. So it sticks. It sticks it down in our memory more so than if you're just doing bullets or facts and figures. Now, just to say that that stuff isn't important to go through, but you also want your audience to know who you are. And that at the end of the day, if they're working with you or dealing with you, you're a human being. And through telling that story, it's like, okay, I know you're a guy who has a little baby, who's married, and who's self-deprecating enough to stand up in front of a room of people that you don't even know and talk about how you blew it, literally or figuratively, with respect to buying the diapers the first time. And it's like, I like you.
There you go. I want to jump back to your story that you shared about Rogers, and it made me think of something, and maybe you can share for businesses the importance. How important is research in regards to storytelling?
Well, it's incredibly important, but what I try to teach to people is you have to tell a personal story. So if you're saying you get what you pay for, then the guy's talking about his diapers or whatever. If you're telling a personal story and you're telling it from the heart, they get it and they feel it. And I had a man stand up and talk about how he lost his keys in LaGuardia Airport. And everybody in the room literally had sweaty palms and started to get anxious just by listening to the story because the way we're processing it. I've had some clients at MTV in New York say to me, no problem, we can just make that shit up. I'm like, whoa, you cannot make it up because something happens to you when you're telling a personal story. You can only tell it because it's yours. You own it. You can't make those details up. And you don't need a script and you don't need research if it's about yourself, right? So if it's something that's truly happened to you, then you're just standing up and talking. And there's something wonderful about not having a slide or pictures or whatever. It's all about creating the pictures in people's minds.
Excellent. Are you seeing a change in corporate culture with this, what you're sharing with us and also
Yes.
sharing with them? What sort of changes are you seeing in regards to corporate culture in relationship to the storytelling piece?
People understand that, especially at a C-suite level, these people are human and these people make mistakes. And these people are okay to share mistakes openly with their company, with their employees. They're okay to be self-deprecating. That creates quite an incredible culture shift in the organization where organizations say we should celebrate our failures. Well, it starts at the top. And if the president is willing to say, by example, I bought 100 diapers and it was a complete disaster, okay, it's okay to say that you made a mistake. It's okay to tell a funny story about yourself. Nobody is going to judge you as a lesser individual for doing so. It creates that honesty, that human level that you need in a corporate environment.
So there is hope and there's light. I think a great example, this recent example of the United Airlines incident with the
Oh,
passenger, I'm sure that you monitored and saw the initial reaction from their CEO, and I'm going, okay, like, and I just think of an example. Wouldn't it have been nice if he could have related an experience that he had before he joined that company about, I understand, like, of course after the fact it became empathetic, but it seemed to be too little too late. So
mm-hmm.
with the CEOs, C-suite people you're dealing with, what sort of guidelines do you give them in regards to storytelling? If, like, I guess it's different. There can be stuff just off the cuff, but there's also can be prepared stuff. And obviously there are two different avenues to storytelling.
There is. And I think that the first, and the United Airlines president and CEO didn't demonstrate this, at least in his first reaction. And the first reaction is really the only one the world is going to remember. It's empathy. It's that you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes and you have to listen. You get C-suite level escalation where blah, 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 and there's an employee who's very, 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 very upset. Put yourself in that person's shoes and listen. and make it about them, not about you. At some point in that conversation, you could bring in a story. I understand. Something like that happened to me. Can I tell you that story? And then you're bringing yourself onto the essentially the same level as the other person. I don't know who counseled that individual at United Airlines. I mean, I guess he's got all kinds of public relations help and corporate communications help and all that kind of. That was so poorly done. But contrast it to many years ago, several years ago now, the McCain family that had to deal with that listeria outbreak. And I think it was Michael McCain who went on camera immediately, like sort of like a fireside chat, and said, we screwed up. We screwed up. And as soon as we knew we'd screwed up, we went public with it. Here's what is happening. I'm going to stay live with you as long as it takes. I'll answer your questions. We're human. We've made a mistake. We're sorry. And this is what we're doing to fix it. Yeah. And you know what? People were okay with it, because if you're saying, I'm human, I made a mistake, something's gone wrong, we're telling you about it, give us a chance to fix it. Offer yourself on a silver platter, and that United Airlines individual did not do that.
Great advice. And not only great advice in the business world, but great advice in everyday life.
I think absolutely. The clients at MTV had me come down to New York and do a couple of sessions with them, and they had a presentation ready to go with very, very big, polished Twitter presentation to Twitter, actually, that they were doing. It was worth millions of dollars. And after they'd gone through this storytelling workshop, they basically threw the slides away, and they just went with sort of single, beautiful images, and they just stood up and talked. Because at the end of the day, you want these clients to want to work with you. You want these clients to know that you're a human being. So lights up, we're going to take a refreshing new approach. They got a picture of a kid drinking out of a hose, standing in a swimming pool, but they just talk. And I think the biggest concern with people that I've observed with presentations is they're nervous because I don't know if I'm going to remember all the points on the slide. Your audience doesn't know the script.
Not only that, your audience, you know more than the audience.
Absolutely. So just put up an image and stand up there and talk to them.
Yep.
Have a conversation with them.
Yep.
And then if you're talking to them, your anxiety level goes down, as opposed to this dark room where, there's a million lights and a podium and bullet points up behind you, and you're freaking and you're getting hives.
Yeah. Well, many years ago when I had hair, I used to have that sort of feeling. But what I do now is I say I'm sharing with the audience. I'm not talking to the audience. So, and whenever I do presentations, or I call them sharing sessions, I don't even like to use the word presentation because it sounds so formal. And when I say I'm here to, we're going to do a sharing session, and you'll always get that one or two person sort of looking at you strange. I said, okay, can I just have you come up for a minute? They say, okay. So I say, if I'm talking to you, you're in front of me and I'm basically projecting onto you. But if we're sharing, I get the person's arm, we're walking together. Mm-hmm. So I care about you so much that I don't want to leave you behind.
Absolutely. And we're tribal as people. We want a group, we want human connection, we want human contact. And that's what this sharing of stories does. I mean, I went into a Starbucks in New York City, and I had told the MTV clients this story about the pitch with Rogers and the Blimp, and some man that I didn't even recognize in the middle of like Times Square Starbucks comes up to me and says, "You're that chick who told us the story about the Blimp." And that was literally like, it was probably 4 years later. And I thought, he doesn't remember my name. He may not have remembered what I was talking about, but he remembered the story. It laid down, right?
Absolutely. And just for people who may be a little bit not knowing about these names, Rogers is one of the largest communications companies in Canada, and McCain Foods is one of the largest food companies in Canada. Marilyn and myself are both based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So I just want to make sure people go, well, what are these companies' names? Like, I know MTV, but Rogers, McCain. So just give some clarity and some understanding. So Time has flown by already. Marilyn always has stuff to do. So, Marilyn, first, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule to share with us. Any final comments and how people can reach you?
Oh, reaching me is simple. You can reach me on my cell, 416-996-3511, or at my website, which is www.barefootbrainstorming.com. But final words are simply, don't be afraid to give of yourself out there in the world of business, because that's okay.
Nice, nice. And we'll have all the contact information posted along with the replay in the post when we post this up again. Marilyn will be back when she's back when she has 30 minutes to spare. By the way, what is up next for you?
There's a couple things in play, but right now it's going to be Scottsdale, Arizona, to do some storytelling workshops there with a women's empowerment event that I'm very excited about.
What dates are those? And the only reason I'm asking is I have a very good member of my community. She is based in that neck of the woods, and I know that she'd absolutely love to attend that.
June 28th. That's the travel date. I've got some stuff locally, but June 28th is the day I'm doing this in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'll forward that information to her. It is Dr. Vibe here. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. If you also want to know, I'm a certified empowerment coach, and I'm president of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. If you want to have a 30-minute empowerment coaching session with me, complimentary, just touch base with me. The 3 best ways to touch base with me: Twitter at drvibeshow, email dr.vibe at the drvibeshow, and finally website address www.thedrvibeshow.com. I would say all the places that you can catch replays of my conversations, but you know what? Just go to your favorite search engine, put in the Dr. Vibe Show. I'm Googleicious. So I'm going to leave it at that. So as always, I'd like to say you're blessed and highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. Thank you for watching this live or on the replay, and look forward to seeing you soon again. And remember, finally, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Thanks for taking the time. We'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.